All right, my beautiful friends, we have to talk. This is getting really interesting. Let's start off with that. It is a Monday, May 13th, 2019. So here's the main story, and there is a lot. China has now hit back with a series of their own tariffs. I believe most of us knew this was going to happen. No one spoke about it, but it was kind of obvious. If some people actually thought China was going to do nothing, who wrote to me, and I don't understand the way certain people's mentality works, but there was no way China was not going to react. China not only has reacted with a series of their own tariffs, they're now threatening to dump U.S. debt. I want to talk about that. Now, let's back up to yesterday. Yesterday was an epic day, and I'm just wondering if this is a setup, and I want to get your input on this. Larry Kudlow turned on the president like a pit bull terrier. He said publicly, and it was covered all over the world, this went viral, that China is not paying the tariffs, and the American people were going to suffer for it. Then, also from the back door, Goldman Sachs came out saying the same thing. Now, what my big question was, and remains, is why would Larry Kudlow turn on the president like that? Unless this is kind of a setup to let stocks bleed off like they're doing right now. Stocks are down across the board on this news of China retaliation, possible dumping of China treasuries. Stocks are down. But the real question is why? Why would Larry Kudlow, who's been really an unbelievable supporter of the president, all of a sudden turn on him and say something that I've been explaining to people for, I don't know, months and months, that China is not paying the tariffs. It was the American people who are subsidizing this and the American people who are going to get hurt. This is his exact words. Please Google it. I posted article after article yesterday with Larry Kudlow's comments, and it's gone worldwide. And the same thing with Goldman Sachs. So is it real, or is it a ploy to force stocks to drop so they can cut rates and institute more quantitative easing? You have to really wonder, because it doesn't make sense. Okay, so we understand. Again, China hit back, stocks are under pressure right now. We'll have to watch how that plays out. Now, let's talk about China's threat of dumping U.S. treasuries. They're not talking about dumping dollar reserves yet. U.S. treasuries, just that. Let's stick to that. What people don't understand, I think, for the most part, especially those that are like, buy American, buy American. Yeah, that's all well and good, and it's great. And I want us to buy American, and we need it, and we need to build things here in our country. Something I've been explaining for, I don't know, almost a decade, sincerely. But going back to what I said yesterday, why does China hold vast amounts of U.S. debt, vast amounts of U.S. dollar reserves? Not because they like us so much, but because they can pull the strings like they're doing now. They can make threats like they are making now. And I covered yesterday in my video that if the president could find a way, the president and the people that surround him, who I think are mental midgets, and they're giving him bad advice, this would not be a simple task. It would be very complicated. But if the president were able to figure out a way to weaponize the debt, their U.S. debt that China holds, and the U.S. dollar reserves that China holds, weaponize it against China, that would be the right way to handle this. What the president has chosen to do, raising tariffs, again, you can't expect a different outcome from doing the same thing. Very bad judgment, in my view. Pretend it's not President Trump. So I know a lot of you are going to get upset, and I'm not beating up on the president. Let's pretend his name is John Smith and he's a Democrat. Let's pretend that for a minute. If John Smith, a Democratic president, were to do the same thing again that he just did and it didn't work, would you expect it to work now? Think about it. Put politics aside. Put the name of the president aside. Understand? You got to disconnect yourself, otherwise you can't see It's meant to blind you, okay? Now, understanding that doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome, may actually be the definition of insanity, although it's really not. But let's just say, because a lot of people like to use that, we know this is not going to work. We see what China's doing now, hitting us with their own series of tariffs and now threatening to dump U.S. debt. Now, China, understand, please, what I'm about to tell you. China, by buying all this U.S. debt, has been literally subsidizing the U.S. economy. We understand how this works. This is what the Federal Reserve has been doing now since 2008, buying vast amounts of U.S. debt. They've been supporting the economy by doing so. So China's been doing the same thing for the longest time. And why? Because we buy their products. Because we buy their products. If we say, okay, we're going to buy American, which I would like to see, why does China need to hold all of our treasuries? They don't need to. Why would they need to support our economy? Why would they need to make the U.S. consumer feel stronger so they will buy things that China makes? Does this make sense to you? Think about what I just said. So China now is threatening to dump those treasuries. What will that do to the U.S. economy? Being that we understand, and it's a very simple mechanism, that by buying the debt, just like the Fed is, it supports the economy. If China were to dump the debt, what would it do to the economy? You don't need to have one functioning brain cell to figure it out. Again, and China's going to weaponize it unless the president can figure out a way to flip it with a group of very smart people. All right, got to get together and do that. Very difficult task, no doubt about it, because it would hurt us here. But if you can figure out a way to twist it, it would work. Again, President John Smith, not Donald Trump. John Smith, Democrat, all right? Think of it that way, and maybe you can see clearly. I hope some of you can. Many of you are so blinded by this, and there's no escaping for you. You've been literally trapped, and that's a shame. But maybe now today is the time to break out of that bubble that you've been shoved into, or box. So if China does what they're threatening to do, will decimate the U.S. economy, decimate. That's why they hold vast amounts of our debt. And again, they've only been doing it because we're buying their products. If we decide not to, if we buy American, which is a great idea, really is, but understand, we're going to take a hit here. Not only would we take a hit here, but to buy American, like our president is saying, President John Smith, Democrat, that would mean we would need to produce these at a lower cost because the middle class is already almost non-existent here in the United States, having to borrow just to maintain their middle class status. So that would mean the U.S. worker would have to take a pay cut. This is all pretty simple. It should follow a nice line for you. So think about what I am saying, okay? A lot of people don't lay it out like this, and you won't hear it from President John Smith, Democrat. He will not tell you these things. President John Smith, Democrat, did not tell you that China is not paying these tariffs. Larry Kudlow had to tell you. Greg Mannarino had to tell you. President John Smith, Democrat, did not tell you that China would be hitting back with their own series of tariffs. John Smith, Democrat president, did not tell you that there is the possibility that China could dump their debt. And the only reason why they're holding that debt is because we buy Chinese products. This should really be exceedingly simple for you to understand. So yeah, sure. Let's build things in America. Absolutely. But let's understand what it means and how it would work. Unfortunately, this whole thing thus far by John Smith, Democrat president, has been handled in a very childish way. He should have thought ahead as to what China would do. He should have thought ahead to a way to deal with the vast debt, U.S. debt that China holds, the vast dollar reserves that China holds. So it's like, how you're planning out a battle. You got to figure out way ahead of time what you're going to do. Right now, it's just like act and let's see what happens. It doesn't work. And doing the same thing again, John Smith, Democrat president, okay? I'm using this abstract dude, didn't outline a lot of these things for the American people before he instituted it. And again, doing the same thing again, expecting a different outcome is not smart. by John Smith, Democrat president. You got it? Anyway, it's amazing that I have to put it into these kind of terms, but this is how some people need to be spoken to, because they're blind. And that's just the way it is. Anyway, look, I think this video has been very important. I think I'm going to ask you to share this video, get it out here. So what do we know? Let's summarize. Stocks are under pressure right now, significant, because China has now decided to hit back with a series of tariffs on our goods. China is now threatening to dump U.S. debt. I told you why. I told you why they were buying the debt, not because they like us so much, but because we're buying their products. If we're not doing that, they're going to dump it. If we're going to enter a trade war, they're going to dump that debt. They're going to rattle that bond market like you cannot believe. That's going to hurt the stock market. That's going to hurt, to a large degree, the U.S. economy. And right now, there seems to be no exit. Understand that. There's no exit. It seems just like escalation here. And many of you believe, and I'm not saying you are wrong, but many of you believe this is going to end in a shooting war. If history is any guide, maybe all of you that are saying that are correct. I sincerely hope with every fiber of my being that is not true. It means a lot of young men, women are going to lose their lives. Your sons, your daughters, your mothers, your fathers, if it escalates to that kind of a situation. All right, look, before I keep going on here, please think about the things I've spoken about with an open mind. Put a generic president in there if you have to, and think about it along those terms. Please share this video. Please get it out there. Let's make a difference. It has to start with you and me. I love all of you. I'll see you at the end of the day.